Yeah. So the one thing that I've observed over the years is that an awful lot of times we do communications for the sake of doing communications. And sometimes we don't know why we're doing them. It just seems like a good thing to do. You know, we have to do something in the newspapers, or we have to do something, and we get busy around doing things, but actually we don't really know why we're doing them. And actually we don't know whether what we're doing is making any difference at all. And oftentimes I would ask myself, and I think you should ask yourself, is what if you weren't to do any communications? Would it make any difference? And sometimes, sadly, the answer to the question I would ask is, you know what, I'm not sure. I've spent the last 2 or 3 weeks doing lots and lots of things, but I actually don't know whether it made any difference whatsoever. And that's just a waste of time. And it's a waste of resources, because at a time when you don't have time or resources, you need to be very careful about that. So what I want to try and do today, you can change slide, please. What I want to do is really to talk about a campaign that is fit for purpose across the whole year. So that's really what we want to try and talk about today. So change, please. So the first thing that I would always do is I would sit down, and whether this was Special Olympics or it was selling biscuits or whatever it was, I would sit down and I would ask myself the question, who are your target audiences? Who do I actually want to talk to in my program? Now, I've listed a few things there. You can add more: athletes, families, sponsors, government, national and local. And that's not just the people who are in power, but it could also be opposition, but anyone who's in that area of government, volunteers, influencers, people in your region, in your country, who when they say something, people listen. And we all, you know, they're very important. Who are they? Do I need to talk to them? Do I need to talk to other sports organizations, because they might be able to help me in the program that I'm doing? And then, of course, there is just the public. Do I need to talk to the public? So, you know, you can add other ones to that, but I've just added one just to give this an example. But it's the first thing that you need to do. Who do I need to talk to in my program? Forget about communications for the moment, but who is it that the stakeholders that I am involved in with my program, and who do I need to address? So do that list. The next thing that I would do then is, and you can change, please, I would ask myself, who are the priority target audiences? Who are the ones that I really need to talk to? Because you don't need to talk to them all at the same time. But who are the ones that you really need to talk to? Is it, am I looking to recruit? Is one of the problems in my program that we're not recruiting enough athletes? So do I need to talk to athletes and families? Is that the big problem with my program right now? I'm guessing that money will be a big issue. So is it sponsors and government that I need to talk to? Maybe you're lucky and you have the money and you have the athletes, but you don't have the volunteers. So it's volunteers that I need to direct my program to. So what I'm saying here is you need to prioritize, and you can change, please. So what are the biggest challenges or issues that I'm faced with as a program? Because the thing here is communications serves the program, not the other way around. Too often we ended up doing communications programs, as I said, and we didn't know why we were doing it. We were just doing it because the communications team needed to be busy. So I would say stop. Ask yourself, what are the biggest challenges or issues that I'm faced with? Who could help me solve those issues? How do I get to talk to them? How can I influence them to support me? And then ask yourself, how can my communications program help? because that's where your communications program supports the strategic issues in your program. So the communications serves the program, not the other way around. So you need to identify who are your priority target audiences. So you can change, please. So what I would do is I would rank them 1 to 4, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, whatever suits you. And I've made up one here. So I've decided in my program, the big issue for me is I need money and I need some big support. So I need to talk, most of all, I need to talk to sponsors and government. I've then decided I need to talk to athletes and families. You know, we need to encourage them to keep coming to the program and the events that we're putting on. And I also need to recruit. Alongside that, I need volunteers to support that. So they're the second thing that I really need to address. Down the line, then, you know, we need to get the public involved. So I've done this in a kind of ranking. There's also a question that I think you should ask yourself here is, you know, in this, you need to be tough. You need to be able to say, no, do you know what? I don't need to talk to them right now. They're not my big priority. My big priority is dealing with getting the money in. So you might say, you know what? I don't need to talk to the public. I don't need to talk to other sports organizations. I don't need to talk to influencers right now. I'm going to put them all aside. And I'm going to focus my communications on the things that really matter to my program. So really important that you do that. You can change, please. Change again. So I've taken the rankings that I did and I put sponsors in national government and local government, people who are decision makers in government. They're the people I want to talk to. Then athletes, families, volunteers, and finally, the public are important to me. I need to think about them. So the questions that I would ask is, well, what I would do is I would direct my efforts towards the most important priorities. And then I would begin to create and implement your communications program. Because until you've done this, you can't create your communications program. So now you know what your main priorities are. So I'm going to direct all my resources or a lot of my resources towards the number 1 list, and then the number 2 list, and then the number 3 list. And then what you need to do is to set out clear, measurable, and realistic objectives for each of the your priority target audiences. And I'm going to use the sponsors as an example in a minute, so I'll come back to that. You need to allocate the proper resources. So if I'm going to do this, how am I going to do it? And who is going to do it? Who are the people that are going to help me? Because if you haven't got the right resources, you're probably going to fail right at the outset. And by doing it this way, by prioritizing, you're allowing the proper resources to go to the things that are important to you. The other thing that I think you need to do is, and I think this is really important, is you need to plan to be successful. As I said earlier on, you know, when you fail all the time, when you do a campaign or you do a lot of work in communications and you don't seem to get any benefit from it, it becomes hugely demoralizing. So plan to be successful, and there's ways we can do that. The other thing is, don't be afraid to say no. To say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to focus all our energies on one thing. And you might say at the start of the year, this year, I'm going to focus on 2 things. I'm going to focus on getting sponsors, getting government on board, and I'm going to run a volunteer recruitment program. And that's all you're going to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. And at the end of the year, if you turn out and you're successful in those 2, you've had a great year. Then you can go and look at all the other things. But don't be afraid to say no. The trouble is we end up trying to do everything. and we can't do it. And then, having done that, create a week by week, month by month calendar of activity, of communications that is supporting the strategic goals of your program. That's what we want to try and do. So if you can change, please. So I've taken sponsors because that was number one on my list. So if that was me and I was saying, right, I need to create a communications program around sponsors. And you might think this is marketing, but I think it's communications. So the first thing I would do is I would set out clear, measurable goals in my campaign. And that needs to be really simple things. For example, I'm going to meet and present to 3 new potential sponsors. As simple as that. You could say, I'm going to meet and present to 2 potential sponsors, but make it something that's achievable. Rather than saying, I'm going to go out and meet 10 new sponsors. You're not. You're failing right from the beginning. So give yourself reasonable objectives. They can be stretching, but they need to be realistic. So don't put down 10 because you're not going to meet 10. So set out what it's going to do. And then, for example, say, I'm going to raise X amount of dollars from sponsorship. And my advice is that you keep that realistic too. Don't say I'm going to raise $100,000 in sponsorship. If you've never raised $100,000 before, you know, it's unlikely you're going to do it right now because you need to start off raising 20 and then maybe 40. And then maybe it becomes 80 and then maybe it becomes 100, but 100 in one go, unlikely to happen. So you're going to fail. So don't create objectives that are likely to fail. So set out clear objectives for yourself in what you want to achieve. Because once you've set out those objectives, you have something to measure your campaign by. And the reason why we do that in terms of measurement is because we turn around and say at the end of it, I was successful. The way I did that was the right way to do it. So all the things that I did to get to where I wanted to get to was the right things. On the other hand, you may not have been successful. And that happened to me all the time. But then I was able to sit down and say, okay, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't achieve that. So what were the reasons why it didn't work? You know what? Maybe I should have done more media relations, or maybe my social media campaign, so I can go back and actually see what we did. And then the next time I do it, I'll do it better. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're going to continually fail over and over and over again. So really important that we set those out. So then, having done my objectives, I would then sit down and say to myself, do my research before I start. I would say, who are the most, in terms of sponsorship? You could do this for any of them. Who are the sponsors most likely to support Special Olympics? And you do a list. And I would suggest to you that you don't necessarily just start with the companies or the people who have most money or profile. Everybody does that. You know, in our country, it's probably the tech companies, the mobile phone companies seem to be all the people who are doing all the advertising, all the marketing communications. So naturally, we think they're the obvious people to go to. Well, actually, they might not be the obvious people to go to. They may have a lot of money. The question you need to ask yourself: what type of company is likely to support Special Olympics? What's in it for them? How can Special Olympics make them more famous, more liked, sell more stuff? They're the questions you would ask if you were dealing with sponsors. And this helps to start your communications program. You need to do this level of rigor before you set out on your communications program. So if you change slide, please. So the next question, once I know that, I've set out my objectives. I've worked out who are the best people for me to go and talk to. And then I need to ask myself, how do I get in front of them? At a meeting, obviously, but that's often harder than it sounds. Maybe at a Special Olympics event. We're having a Special Olympics event and we're going to invite a number of people just to come and see the event, nothing else, just a little bit of hospitality and let them see it and get a feel for what Special Olympics is about. That's not easy. That's not easy as well. And also perhaps maybe what I need to do is I need to upscale or start doing some media outreach so that the sponsors that I'm hoping to get in front see things in the media about Special Olympics, because sponsors like to see that their association with you is going to be recognized in the media. So therefore, maybe I need to do things in the media so that when I go to my meeting with them, they have seen something that's been in the national media. That might be a way of getting them involved. There might have been something on the radio. You know, if you're very lucky, you might have got something on television, which is really difficult to do. So out of that then, having made that stage, having gone through that, I would then move on and say to myself, how do I create my communications campaign? And I would set out some really straightforward objectives here too. I'm going to do national media outreach, and I'm going to get 2 articles in the national newspapers. That's all. That might be very difficult now, but I'm saying from my perspective, 2 articles in the national newspapers, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to get 1 radio interview. That's it. Goes back to the thing, having your goals measurable and attainable. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set myself, I'm going to have 3 meetings. I'm going to meet with 3 people, that's it. And I'm also going to have a campaign that will encourage potential sponsors to come to a Special Olympics event. And that's part of your communications program. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a different type of communications. I'm actually going to bring a Special Olympics event to them. And I have done this in the past, and we did this in the past, whereby we went to a company and we brought, for example, a table tennis table. And we brought it into the company, into their canteen, and we invited their staff to play table tennis with Special Olympics athletes. They had never met a Special Olympics athlete, never spoken to a Special Olympics athlete, had no sense that a Special Olympics person could play table tennis. And often as not, the Special Olympics athlete won. And they went away saying, wow. And that is communications. And that's how I might structure it. So I might say, I'm going to do that once. In 1 company, I'm going to bring a Special Olympics event to them. And that's part of your communications program. And that's the end of it. So it is attainable. It's possible to do, and it's moving. And I could have flipped that, and I could have put that, say, for volunteers. And I think you can understand how I would go back and do the same thing for volunteers. Romy, if you can go back 2 slides for me, please. Yeah, slide number 12. Yeah, slide 12. No, yeah, there. So yeah, if that was volunteers, you know, what are the measurable objectives? You know, we're going to recruit 50 new volunteers. That might just be what we're going to do. And that might be 50, you might say is ridiculous. I couldn't possibly do that. I'm going to recruit 20 new volunteers. Fine, but at least know what you're going to do. Then you could be saying to yourself, where am I likely to get those volunteers from? What sort of people am I looking for? What sort of people have the time to give me? So you do the same rigor across what it is you're doing, but it's having that level of preparedness across all your communications before you actually start activating the program. Okay, Rami, if you can go to slide 14. Yeah. So having done all that, and you decide, listen, this is what we're going to do, you then need to kind of come up with some type of calendar of activity for throughout the year. Now, I've just put something down here just to, this might be, your timings might be all different to me, but, you know, so I might decide, right, government is, I really need to get in front of government. It's very important. So I'm going to allocate, I'm going to just do January and February is going to be around my talking to government and all the communications I'm going to do around that. At the same time, you might say, listen, I need to talk to families at the same time. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that you need to calendar out all the things that you're going to do. Now, I'm looking at my calendar that I've done, and I'm going to actually contradict myself here. There's far too much on that calendar. You know, if you're trying to do government and you're trying to do families, and then at the same time, you're preparing to do an athletes program. And while the athletes program is going on, you have that is far too busy. So I'm going to contradict myself completely here and say, don't do a calendar like that. It's too busy. Give yourself a chance. So, but the point I'm trying to make is calendar out the activities so that you have a chance of success. And be prepared to be able to say, no, we're not doing that. I can't do it. I don't have the resources. I don't have the energy. And I know it's going to fail because I need to prioritize something else. And that's sometimes difficult to do because everybody wants something. But you have to be able to do that and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to forget about talking to the public. It's not important. The most important thing I need to do is A, B, and C and focus on that. But create your calendar so you know where you're actually going. You can change, please. Another way of looking at this is, and I don't want to confuse people here, but another way of looking at this, and this is used a lot in creating commercial communications campaigns. And what it does is it divides the campaign up into three areas: drumbeat, tentpole, and epic. And let me start with drumbeat. Drumbeat is the kind of everyday things that you do. It might be your ongoing social media program, if you're lucky enough to have a social media program, or you're lucky enough to have a target audiences that use social media. So your drumbeat might be your everyday social media campaign. And you're doing that, you know, week by week, day by day, week by week, month by month, and that goes on. And then the next layer of activity is what is called tentpole. And that's kind of big events that you have throughout the year. It might be a local games or a specific event games. You might, you know, your basketball competition. And it's a little bit higher profile. And you use that then to get a little bit more media coverage across all the media, both traditional and social. So they're the kind of tentpole. And they might be 6 of those a year. That might be what you do. So you have kind of 6 peaks, mini peaks throughout the year. And then the final one is epic. And epic is one of those activities that would be, for example, your national games, or when your team goes to a World Games and you're doing a lot of activity around that. These are big kind of once a year, twice a year activities that you might do, and you create a communications program around that particular event. But it's a way of looking at your campaign throughout the year. Drumbeat, the everyday things; tentpole, the slightly more higher profile, but only 4 or 5 events a year. And then you have your big event, epic, once a year, perhaps, that you put all your resources into. But it's another way of looking at creating a communications program that can be successful. So you can change, please. So I'm coming to the end of my talking, and I'm hoping you can have questions and answers. Hopefully I have a few answers. So the questions I would put to you, what I want you to think of, first of all, is how do you boil the ocean? Well, the answer to that is 1 cup at a time. You do things in small ways. And that's what I've been trying to impress upon you. So what are the main priorities of my program? Not my communications program, of my Special Olympics program. What are the objectives? What are the things that I want to do? What do I need to achieve in order to sustain my program? And then ask yourself, how can communications help? And then prioritize. Pick the things that need to be done and leave aside the things that you can't cope with. You can get back to them another day. And here you need to be brave, because instinctively you'll want to try and do everything, but you can't. So you've got to say to your team or say to whoever, we're not going to be able to do that. I just need to be able to do one thing, and I need to do it well. That's really important. And all of this then delivers in terms of, I was saying, doing a successful program. So what you're doing here is you're building for success. The other way is you're building for failure, because you have no hope of succeeding because you're trying to do so much. So here you're trying to build for success. And I want to leave you, you can change slide, please. I want to leave you, before we have questions, with one thought. And please think about this as you start to create and build your communications program. And there was the great painter Vincent van Gogh said, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. And that's really what I've been trying to talk to you about today. So that's me done on the talking. I hope you were able to pick some little things out of that. I hope some little things were relevant to you, and you can take them and move your communications campaign forward. And I would be delighted now to answer any questions that you have. Rami.
Thank you so much, Julian. That was, again, a wonderful presentation for our programs, so practical. And I'm hoping that from this very practical and step-by-step information that's been given this week, we'll start having some targeted questions from our programs, especially those that might be new to the process, but as well those experienced program staff that are looking to refine their objectives and refine their approach. I'm really hoping to see some questions in our chat box, and everyone is welcome to ask questions verbally in French or in English. Please remember, we do have the facility to accommodate both languages. So I'll give it a moment to ask, to hear questions. Staff are also welcome to ask. And I have a few questions of my own, but I'd like to just give it a bit of a few moments silence to hopefully get our first question from a program.
Julian, I have a question. Maybe let me, while we wait for some of our program leaders to to put together their questions. I have a question in terms of priorities, and I believe that was a very, very good guidance, because I note that we normally tend to have so much, we put everything on the same level and want to deliver everything, and then it gets chaotic.
Yeah.
So I really, really agree in terms of priority. But my question is that would, in the middle of executing when you've laid down your priorities and you begin your your approach, your plan, you're in the middle of everything.
Yeah.
Would a priority change because of a circumstance? And would it be all right to do that, to say, hey, wait a minute, this was my priority, but I think I need to change priority here and do something else. So my question is generally that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the level, the level of priority that we're talking about, I don't think will change. I think circumstances, smaller things might change, but your priority is, if I need to raise money.
Yes, yes.
That's unlikely to change. The things we're talking about are kind of big priority things. Things can always change. Things do change. But my feeling is no. You're going to stick with your priority. Stick with what it is you want to do. Stay with what it is. Finish it out. Complete it, and then move on. That's not to say that tactically, within the campaign that you're running, that you wouldn't change. Because I think you need to be flexible, because you might start out saying, listen, these are the objectives I have. This is the campaign structure that I've set up. And then as you're going through it, you say to yourself, you know what, this isn't working as well as I thought. I'm going to change. So you need to be flexible in the implementation, but I don't see that there's going to be a massive change in your priority. If recruiting athletes is a priority, that's a priority. It's unlikely that's going to go anywhere. So it's in the implementation that I can see you need to be flexible, but I don't see that you need to be jumping around from priority to priority. Otherwise, you haven't done your homework at the beginning properly.
Yes, no, thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Charles, and thank you, Julian, for your response. I think my next question would be towards a bit of your background as well in sports journalism, Julian, when you were trying to get Special Olympics Ireland onto the news agenda and trying to get earned media for your program. I'm curious, in the beginning, did you go strongly the sports route? Because that's where you have your strength, and maybe, or did you more go from the human interest or the feature route, or media houses that you felt would be a bit more sympathetic towards maybe the developmental goals of Special Olympics? I'd just like to hear about where you saw some of your first successes as a small program. Yeah,
great question, actually. We ended up, sports journalists didn't want to know about us. They just wouldn't accept that people with intellectual disability could play sport. They could understand that they could do things, and they weren't nasty in that respect. But no, we didn't go there. We never got anything on the sports pages. It was all human interest. It was all slightly, it was all kind of human interest. Isn't this kind of cute? I know, to be absolutely honest, it was all, isn't this a bit cute? Somebody with Down syndrome playing, basketball. And it was a bit like that, to be quite honest. And then I think after a while, people recognized, that these are human beings, they're citizens, they have every right to play sport. And you know what? Some of them are very good. And even if they're not very good, it doesn't lessen the effort that they make. And I think probably, Paralympics path was the same. It was seen as a nice thing, kind of, isn't it great for them out doing things? But the reality is, it's sport, and it's done at a particular level. So yeah, no, we had that problem. And actually, on that point, while you're there, I think another thing that I would say to people as they're developing their communications program, one of the other objectives we had that kind of sat alongside all the other things that we were doing was, I set myself an objective that I would make a new friend in the media every 3 months. And I'd say to myself, I'm going to meet somebody and I'm going to tell them about Special Olympics. And you know what? They mightn't do anything, but in 6 months' time, they might. So I made it my business that I would build up my diary of people who knew a little bit about Special Olympics. And actually, the very first time we got anything on television for Special Olympics was because work that I had done with a guy who worked in radio in our national radio station. And I met him and I told him all about it, and I told him again, and I rang him up and I rang him up, and I kept doing it. And eventually they did a piece about Special Olympics on a television, a youth sports television program. But that was all done because I just kept nagging the poor man, who's actually gone on, ironically, to be my very best friend in life. And I'm godparents to his children, and he's godparents to our children. So it's funny how life turns out. But apart from that silly story, I would have it going on. Try and make a new connection with somebody all the time. Try and meet another person, and make it easy for yourself. Say, I'm only going to meet 3. Don't try and think you're going to meet the entire newsroom of your national television station. It's not going to happen. Meet one person. And then say in 3 months' time, I'm going to meet another person. Like, make it, be successful.
Thank you, Julian. That's great advice. It's so good to hear how it was broken down by you and where you saw success practically with getting the message of Special Olympics Ireland out when it was something that was very, very little known, which is the case of a lot of our programs. I'm just double checking the chat box. Oh, I see a
Susan has a hand up.
Wonderful, Susan, you recognized. I think you can unmute yourself. Please go ahead and ask Julian that question.
Thank you, Robbie. Julian, how are you?
Hi, Susan. Good morning.
Good morning to you. My question, I'm taking a cue from Romi's question, but mine kind of looks internally at Special Olympics. And my question could cut across the region or the programs. I think it's practical for both. Julian, I know from last week's presentation and this presentation, I know you've had a long journey with the communications within Special Olympics, and I think you've seen it grow leaps and bounds. And my question was, generally, communication is not usually at the priority list of high priority list of either programs or organizations sometimes. And therefore it is given it's maybe among the list that paid attention to. So I was wondering, what tips could you share with us that we could use both in, I think it could be helpful for us in the region, but also in the programs. What tips could you share that could help us push communications to be at the priority list in the general setup of things? Because sometimes it's the area that is underfunded, no attention paid to, no strategies. What tips can you share with us? Thanks.
Yeah, great point you make. Well, the answer to your question is very simply, communication should be right up there at the top of their priorities in a program, because you can't do anything if you don't communicate. You know, it's right up there. If you need to make things happen, you need to be able to communicate what it is you want to tell people and what it is you want them to do. We talked about last week the know, do, and feel piece. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to feel? And that's all around communications. And if communications isn't at the very top of the priority in terms of the resources that need to be given to it, you have very little chance of success. Absolutely very little chance of success. So the answer to your question is yes, communications is essential, it's vital, and it needs to be right up there. The communications person needs to be working right alongside the director, the leader, the leadership in terms of in making the priorities and the policies that need to be done. If you don't do that, you are destined to fail. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yes, it helps a lot. Thank you. Thank you. It really helps.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Julian, for the response. We have still a bit of time left, and it would be great if we could utilize that time to ask Julian at least one or two more questions. I have more questions too, but it would be wonderful to hear from one of our program leaders. If you have any questions specific to your program, to your region in Africa. Julian has so much experience. I think one of the most interesting things that he might have done, of the many interesting things that he did for Special Olympics, was the first regional games in Europe, and trying to create a property that was not just one program, but of course many programs in a time where that was completely new soil. So I'm sure he came up with a lot of different challenges and cultural differences to navigate outside of his own program.
Rami, it was interesting just on that, to go back to the point that I was talking about. Yeah, we decided that we would host a European Games in Dublin. I don't know why we did, but we did, because it was a lot of work and we really didn't know what we were doing, to be quiet. We were very young at the time, but actually the reason that we did it was a communications objective. We decided, or we had a thought, that we were doing a lot of little things. You know, I was meeting a journalist and other people were doing things, and we were getting a lot of little things going on. And we were making very slow progress in terms of what we thought where we wanted to be. And we were struggling to convince, you know, government that we were, you know, we deserved to be supported. So we decided, why don't we do one big event? We just do one big event and nobody will be able to ignore us after that. And it was a kind of a daft idea, actually, but it was a great idea. So the big event, the big event that we decided to do was to host a European Games. We could have come up with something smaller, actually, in hindsight, but we came up with let's host a European Games. And we started out with no money. We managed to convince a couple of people to do a few things for us. But actually what happened was, once we got to one stage, we then jumped onto another stage, you know, and we did it. And I was working in RTE at the time, and I convinced the powers that be in RTE, would they show the opening ceremony live? No opening ceremony in the history of Special Olympics had ever been shown live, ever in the world. And so they did a 2-hour program, and they did the Special Olympics, the opening ceremony live. And all of a sudden, from going from nowhere, we were suddenly on national television, you know, and we made a sudden jump. And the communication, the program priority was to raise the profile of Special Olympics in order to do stuff. How we did it, the communications that delivered that was hosting the games. It was never about hosting the games. It was about raising the profile of Special Olympics. And if you jump that forward then to 2003, we did exactly the same thing again. Special Olympics Ireland and people, Mary Davis and a few of us, decided we were going to do the same thing again. So we bid for the World Games in order to jump Special Olympics profile in Ireland through the roof. And we held the games, and that was, you know, massively successful, hugely successful. But Special Olympics in Ireland now is one of the best funded sports organizations in the country, because it did what it did. Now, I'm not suggesting you all go out and try and host World Games. Please don't. It's very difficult. But what I'm saying is, it's taking what is a strategic priority for your program and making a communications decision that's going to support that. And that's really what I'm talking about here. That's a very long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think thank you, Julian. I think it's a great story, and we might need to have a special session, maybe just on the journey to regional games for the program.
That could be a national games. You know, it could be we're going to host a big national games, or we're going to have a big national basketball competition. You know, we're going to go back to what I was talking about in terms of the tentpole and epic. We might decide next year we're going to put on one epic event, and it's going to be a multi-sport event, and we're going to use that as a catalyst, as a catapult for doing more things. So that might be your communications decision. So, you know, it can be done. And what that does is it allows you to invite lots of potential sponsors. It allows you to invite government and influencers to come and see it. And that is your communications platform for the next stage of your program. So it's having that, what is your strategic priority, and how is communications going to support that?
Thank you, Julian. I think that makes a lot of sense. We are getting towards the end of our session, but I'm so pleased that we still have our third and final wrap-up session. I'm going to be recirculating to the group the recordings, the presentations, and we'll be having 2 other sessions in the next 2 weeks before we meet with Julian again for his third and final session. So I'm hoping that with a lot of the digestion and maybe some of the revisiting of some of the very practical guidance that he's given us today specifically, we're going to have some targeted questions and some difficult questions for Julian about how you're going to take some of this advice and put it to work in your program, or what you've tried that you need to refine. We're really hoping to see some specific questions from programs. And I'd just like to thank everyone again for attending, great attendance, and I think even more than last week. So we look forward to welcoming Julian back amongst us on the, just sort of double check the date, on the 26th of November, I believe. Yes, we will see Julian back among us again. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any burning questions. We can collect information. It's great for Julian to have the feedback about something quite specific or detailed that you would like a response on by the time. We do have some time to give Julian to reflect on any questions, so don't hesitate to reach out. You all have my email addresses. If you don't, it's on the Marketing Communications dashboard. The link is in the chat box. And just to thank Julian once again for coming to speak with Africa Region, and we're really looking forward to the last session and what fruit all of these very rich discussions are going to bear in our programs in our region going forward. So I'll just hand over the final comment to Charles, and then we'll close in respect of time. Thank you.
Well, Romy, thank you so much. You said it all. I just want to, on behalf of the Africa region, Julian, want to thank you sincerely for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your expertise with us. It is indeed very, very useful. We are so thankful. So thank you very much. We look forward to the next session. And thank you to the program leaders. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you all. Good morning from Ireland. See you soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.